just know that we will not necessarily respond to your comment today. We want to hear from you, but at some point it will be addressed or noted. So if you wish to make a comment, please let us know. I see a few.
Looks like Peggy has a question.
Peggy, okay.
Well, I don't actually have a
For some
question.
reason, I can't see.
Oh, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I
So
can
Peggy
hear
Bill on Lopez, and I wanted to just express my appreciation for how quickly the Land Bank has responded to the potential opportunity out at Higgins Point, out at the head of Watmo, which is just kind of come into our focus again more recently in the last couple of weeks when the family said that they might want to sell it. This is always considered to be, in my mind, one of the really priority properties. That's right. It's the gateway to Watmo, Chadwick, close to Point Colville. It's a really important connector piece. And I really appreciate how responsive Lincoln and the Preservation Trust have been. And also just appreciative of conversations around Top of the World and Caulfield Farm. And I just want to do a call out for good work, Land Bank. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Peggy. Always good to hear. Steve Horn, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thanks. Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I want to speak in support.
See you, but
What?
you could.
Can't. Sorry, what?
I can hear you.
Oh,
I can hear him.
okay. So I wanted to speak in support of the Top of the World on Lopez, which is a property nearby where we live. So we do walk there, although I don't walk much anymore. So someday maybe it will be wheelchair accessible. But it's a one of a kind piece of property. It's at top of a hill. We have some hilltops on the islands for sure and mountaintops, but there's something very special about that view out across the islands that is pretty unique in my experience, except maybe Mount Constitution. And there's also a very sweet sense of walking. It's part of a trail network as well. So that's, I guess, what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, for those comments. And I'm scrolling through my. Okay, I see a hand raised. Megan Crandall.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Just, I see that Top of the World is on the agenda later, so I won't speak at any length. I just wanted to express gratitude to the folks at the Land Bank. It's been a bit of a roller coaster ride in terms of the potential preservation of that property. We've had some really incredible, generous support, some potential big donors from the community, and I'm deeply grateful to the folks at the Land Bank for being so informative and interested and supportive along the way. So I don't know how much more information we can share yet. I hope to be able to share updates soon. And in the meantime, thanks for hanging with us as we figure this out.
Great, thank you, Megan. Scrolling through my screen. Everybody help me out if I've missed somebody. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Okay. All right, then we will move on to the next item of the agenda, which is to approve the April minutes. Are there corrections to the minutes?
I saw one on page 3 of 5 under the first large paragraph, Katy Mountain Development LLC property, AKA Buck background. Towards the, I suppose the last sentence of that first large paragraph where it says, however, the use of Roche Harbor land is permissive only. So we just need to take the out of there, I think. That's the only thing that caught my eye.
Okay,
On the last page, page 5 of 5, there's a reference to the CART co-file report and discussion, and it says interested parties can listen via, and there's no link or any other information. So it's not clear where you would go to listen.
Good catch.
okay, don't have the page in front of me. Let's see, it's under the stewardship update portion of the minutes for Orcas Island. Peter's comments is that Scott Rosenbaum planted Wapato blubs instead of bulbs.
You don't know about blubs?
Are blubs a new thing? Any other corrections to the minutes?
Yeah, this is Doug. On page 2 of 5, under council liaison, the third to the last line talks about the early stages of a multi-modal trail. I wasn't exactly sure what that meant.
Multimodal, does that mean pedestrians, biking, multiple modes of
Modal is the
transportation?
right word, or, okay.
I'm not sure, is it spelled correctly?
And then on page 4 of 5 on the outreach volunteer report, Tanya announced 2 out of 3 community conversation events have taken place. Yet I think maybe all 3 had taken place because there's a reference by earlier, but that I think that somebody had gone to all 3 of them. So I wasn't sure about the timing there.
I went to all 3 and they were all complete before the last meeting.
That's what I thought. That was your reference, and so it would seem that we ought to be consistent. If you went to all 3 before the meeting, I imagine Tanya announced that 3 out of the 3 events had taken place.
Okay, good.
And I have just some typos that I will send to Aaron.
Okay, if there are no further corrections, from the commission, then the April minutes will be approved with corrections. All right, moving on to chair and commissioner reports. Any commissioners like to speak?
Me.
I would maybe just add that yesterday afternoon, the San Juan Island commissioners got together with Doug McCutcheon and Michael Noonan at Zylstra Preserve to shoot a few scenes for his film about the land bank that he is doing as a volunteer, which I think is fantastic. So shout out to Michael Noonan and
Nice.
Douglas McCutcheon for helping. Actually, Doug was the production assistant yesterday and did a fantastic job.
Great, thank you, Michael and Doug.
Have other commissioners been approached about this? To participate in this?
We haven't on Orcas, no.
Okay.
I don't know.
He's been shooting a lot of staff for sure.
Yeah, I kind of doubt it, but it's going to happen. So get ready.
Yeah, you have to pretend like you're an actor.
Okay.
And we did really well.
Nice.
Good. So I have my couple of comments we're going to be addressing later on in the agenda, so I don't feel the need to make any announcements. So any other commissioners want to report something back? Not at all.
Looks like we need more coffee in the room here.
No kidding. Okay, so we could move on to council update. We're a little bit early.
I got an email
Oh.
from Christine Mene saying that she was going to be late. So she'll join as she can.
Okay,
And I think she has to also go over to Orcas at some point, but we'll keep an eye out for when she is able to get on and let her speak at that point.
okay. Well, why don't I just take a moment to just briefly talk about this survey opportunity, and we could review it again in outreach to get feedback, if that's okay. So we were approached, or I was approached last week by a Spring Street junior, Kai Litch, who is working on his senior project. He's been doing an internship with a CEO in Seattle who is involved in this open source software called Polis. And it's a new kind of surveying method, software method that uses artificial intelligence, as he calls it, to gather a large number of opinions and assemble the data in a visually impactful and digestive way. And one of the differences between this kind of survey and another survey is you begin with seed statements instead of questions, and the respondents either agree, disagree, or pass, but they have the opportunity to make it their own seed statements. And then those statements are randomly sent to other participants, and it grows and grows from there. And it's been used by other countries and governments and municipalities, and it's part of the computational democracy project to be more inclusive. And so we had Kai has to pick a subject matter for his survey, for his project. And he approached the land bank initially with the idea of doing a survey on our agricultural lands. But we talked with a few people in the outreach committee and also outside our committee, and felt that was a bit too much of a repeat of what CART just did, and that we wanted to make it more wider. So basically capture the whole wide net, an opinion poll survey of the land bank that would be county-wide and really subject-wide. We would select some statements to get it started, and then it would grow from there. And so our outreach committee that met this week with Kai virtually seemed to be excited about it. So we will be talking more on outreach to get some feedback from the other commissioners. Of course, there's still more to learn, but we're excited. This would be at no cost to the commission, but we would learn something from it.
Yeah, I think this is one of those amazing opportunities that you find out here, frankly. Just something that pops up out of the blue, and it's associated with the things that are happening in the tech community, and you know, and an amazing student. Peter and I were talking, and we were remarking on how at that age we probably didn't compare very well with.
Yeah, he's a pretty talented, very focused kid, really talented musician, and obviously he's grown into a young man who's got focus on other things. His emails seem like they've come from a 40-year-old professional to me. I would have no idea that he was a junior. So he is serious about it. It's not a fluky thing. Yes, Brian, please add.
Yeah, Sandy, I think this sounds really intriguing. But having said that, and having heard a little bit about the process, I don't really understand it very well.
Understood.
Yeah, and so I would suggest that either Kai and or the principal of the firm that does this stuff come in at some point and make a presentation to the whole commission. But it sounds like potentially an interesting and valuable tool to assess the land bank's position and reception in the community, and maybe, if necessary, make some course corrections.
So we were supposed to receive by email a sample from another entity or organization, or I think a community that would be helpful. Kai is gone for a couple of weeks, and so what you're saying, Brian, is you need more information before you feel comfortable going
Right.
forward with it. Okay. All right. Any other? I'm not doing a great job explaining it. Any other commissioners about that, or any other reports, or bring anything up while we're waiting for Chris? Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think it's great. We should support anything like this that students are doing. Yeah, I look forward to more information, but I don't think that should stop the process. And I think a presentation would be incredible. I'd love to see more about this. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
So Sandy, do you
Yes.
did you get the sense from the presentation that he did for us, the smaller group, that there's a time frame
So
for him?
here's the thing, he needs to be wrapped up on it by August 1st. And so the timeline, the rough timeline that we talked about in the, so there's a window of opportunity to do it. it's not wide open for the next year or something. He said beginning of August, he would need to be done. So what that would look like would be a survey that was open for a couple of weeks in July. So the survey would be promoted in June, say the last 2 weeks of June, and open the next 2 weeks of July. And then he would have a few weeks to assemble it into a report that we would be able to see. So I think and he's gone now for 2 weeks on a school trip. So I'm not sure that for the timeline that we will have, if we wait until the June meeting to discuss it towards the end of June, I think it will be too late. But I might suggest that the outreach committee circulate more information to the other commissioners. And we have had an interview with Kai this week. So
Talking about you, Kai.
is he? Oh, there she is.
Rachel.
Oh, Rachel. This is Rachel, Kai's mom.
Well, here's what I can say. What I took away from that meeting yesterday is that this is a survey that would be 100% online. There's no option to do it in printed material or anything like that. That's the only access, but it takes minimal access for someone to get into the link and to the survey. They don't have to be super adept at computer skills. I think the setup that I understood was that Kai's going to be looking for, say, 50 seed statements. They're not questions, they're statements relating to, for us, it would be the broader operation of the land bank's mission and the work we're doing, and, you know, conservation versus preservation, et cetera, et cetera. And we would not necessarily be providing those seed statements. We would give him a list of people and organizations that would give a good representation both for and not so much for the land bank, so that he would be querying from a mixed group of perspectives on the land bank's operation, those seed statements. I would assume probably we can throw some in, but he's looking to take a couple steps away from the land bank, so it's not us managing and manipulating the survey. So the other thing I learned that I thought was fantastic is that, as Sandy said, say it's a 50 or even 100 seed statements go out, they're randomly presented to everyone who gets on, but everyone sees all the statements. And at any particular time, the data is coming back in real time. So he can, you know, when that survey shuts off, it's my understanding that at that moment, we can see how these clusters have kind of grouped out in terms of areas of consensus or similar interest. I think he said groups A and B, and then these different topics show up in there. But he said he could have the possibility, as the survey is open and running, he could look at what district input that's coming in from the different districts. And if one particular district like Lopez wasn't really responding, we weren't getting much impact, that it would give us some time to do more outreach to connect with people and or organizations on Lopez to make sure that they know about it and that they're participating. So we do have some opportunity to make sure we're getting a good broad representation across the county. And what I thought he said was, you know, at the end of the survey, bam, you can have the data. And if we want a written report, that can be done in a couple of weeks. But in terms of really just getting something to look at, that comes back pretty fast. And the intriguing thing is allowing people to make their own statements, and then those get added to the mix. And that really lets you know, that'll bring up things that we may not have known about, and they may or may not get traction. So we talked about what if everyone comes back and says that they thought we should have a swimming pool on Decatur Island or Shaw or something, and a lot of people wanted that. We wouldn't necessarily, we're not obligated to produce that swimming pool, but then we have data that we can then pass on to an organization that project might fall under their mandate. So we'll gain information about the whole county and what people are interested in. And if it doesn't fall within our scope of authority, we can certainly pass the information on to other organizations. So I'm kind of excited about it. I think it's
That's a good point, Krista, that really this is an independent, it's not a land bank sponsored survey. It's a survey about the land bank that's happening over here, that we're providing a little bit of input, but it's basically supporting this student with a project that will be ultimately, should be ultimately helpful for us. So yes, Jim.
Sandy, do you need a decision from us? I mean, I'm in support of anything that students are doing for projects. I just think we should let it go forward. I don't want to delay anything or.
Well, that's what I'm hoping for. I guess I think Brian is the only one that raised an issue wanting to move forward in a more slow manner, but we won't really have this particular opportunity if we do that, Brian. So
I didn't really realize the issue of the timeline, Sandy.
oh yes, that we just learned that piece.
And I'm fine going forward with it.
Thumbs up.
Okay, excellent. We're at 9 a.m. On the dot. Miles have joined us. Has Christine come in yet?
Doesn't look
Scroll.
like it.
Okay. All right. So why don't we move on to the financial update? Is that Aaron or Lincoln?
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Aaron.
First up, just a note that council did approve our what was actually the second amended budget for 2021. The first one was done in December, so just a little bit of a correction there. So council did approve our budget on the 6th of May. Updates to that budget will be reflected in the second quarter financial statement that I will share with you guys in July. A couple of the highlights from that, as we remember, reflected mostly in the sale of the conservation easement for Beaverton Marsh with the Preservation Trust, the purchase or the acquisition of the Buck property for Katy Mountain, and donation from Barker. So a lot of the adjustments did come pertaining to acquisition and sale. So moving on from that, looking at REIT for the month of April, a very strong April. We came in at about $673,000 in REIT for the month, which is extremely high compared to previous years. So the trend is still really strong here. As of April, we are sitting at 1.7 or yeah, 1,782,000 in REIT, which is definitely well ahead of projections and budget. And that's great. It's great to see that it continues. As I keep an eye on the month of May here, we're currently sitting at 381,000. And projection for the end of the month is a little bit over 600,000 again for May if the trend continues. Yes, Jim?
I have a question for Sandy and maybe you, Aaron. When are things going to run out?
When's the bubble gonna burst?
Yeah, because this is amazing.
It's hard to say. More inventory is coming on right now, so
So
prices are,
people are deciding to sell because it is a seller's market, or?
yeah,
I mean, I
yes.
saw that there were a couple of significant sales. There was a 7 million plus sale and a $2 million sale and a couple others that were in there. But wow, this is phenomenal, and it's just kind of one of those things that you have to feel that there's going to be an end to it. But I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
just wanted to comment.
yeah, I would say, if that does happen, we're definitely thankful for the great start to the year. When you compare the REIT by year graph, you can kind of see where we sit in April, even compared to last year. I mean, given a lot of the influx and sale didn't happen until, July, August, September, and then carried on from there. So just seeing that we're starting off so strong in 2021, where I think, I'm not sure we intended for this strong start to the year to continue the way it has, especially when you can compare previous months in previous years. We're on a great trajectory for this year for sure.
Yeah, we're basically at twice as much as where we were at the same point last year.
Exactly. Yeah, we're just under 2, and we were around 1 million last year at this point. So it's looking good so far.
Well, sorry to interrupt you, Aaron, but I just think it's phenomenal and something we all need to be paying attention to as time goes by here.
Definitely. So that's all I have to report on finances for the month of April. Unless there's any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. So if there's no additional questions or comments, we'll move to the director's report with Lincoln.
Right, I'm gonna share my screen. So we have a few things to talk about today. First up being the Katy Mountain Preserve Edition, which closed. So this is the new shape of our preserve. I don't know what it looks like, but it's getting larger, and it is a phenomenal place. And here it is in the context of English Camp, which is the other protected area. And of course, this is Briggs Lake, which is the Roche Harbor drinking water reservoir. So we're making progress in trying to pull this whole large scale conservation area together. And that was a big step last week.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a long time coming. That was a 5-year, at least 6-year maybe undertaking, but we got it done. So ongoing projects or new projects, just wanted to take you through a couple of those. This is the Higgins property. This is Lopez Island. So Watmow Bay is here. And you can see most of this is the National Monument. This is our property is right here. I haven't differentiated any of that or differentiated conservation easements by organization either, but this is a conservation easement that we hold. The trust holds these. So you can see the context of this property, and it's one that we've been watching for a long time. The family has now decided that they're going to put it on the market. So I've been talking with the brother who's basically running, I guess he's the executor of the estate. And so we've been having a good dialogue back and forth. We've talked about this with the Preservation Trust. So we have a little bit of time on this one. I think the family's very interested in selling it to us. That doesn't mean they're going to give us some phenomenal discount, but they're wanting to give us the opportunity at least to make a play for it. A little bit more about the property. This is from the Pulling It All Together 2 report for salmon recovery for the county. So you can see the priority fish use regions map. And this is the Higgins property down here. A little bit later, we're going to talk about the Glenwood Inn property on Orcas, which is here also in one of these priority fish use regions. That means that we've got Chinook documented in both of these areas, and they're high priorities for salmon recovery action. In this case, we're talking about a relatively small property, 11.5 acres. There's the potential for 2 development units because there are actually 2 separate parcels. There's this parcel and then this one sticking out to the side, running along a utility line. Basically, that's another parcel, but with a boundary line modification, you could put 2 houses out here. It also has the oldest house on Lopez, built by Chadwick in the 1870s. Not in terribly great shape, but it's still there. There's an extensive midden area here. There obviously was a lot of Native American activity on this particular site. Just some photos, which Peggy took. Peggy Bill, thank you, Peggy. So we spent a good bit of time figuring out how to transfer photos from one place to another yesterday, but we managed to do it. So this is the old, this is the old house here. This is one of the beaches. You can see there are these 2 pocket beaches and extensive shoreline going down from Watmow on this side and on the Rosario Strait on this side. Also some nice kelp beds off of there. And another shot of the house with one of those beaches. And here's a good one. Just a phenomenal place. Last photo is just looking back toward Chadwick Hill, which is this Watmow Bay beach is here. This is really the last piece. As you can see, if we go back to this shot, this is the last unprotected part of Watmow Bay. So it's an amazing opportunity. And it's great to have the shot at doing this. The downside is it's not going to come cheap. They're contemplating a listing price of 2.5 million, which does not seem out of line, frankly, with other things that are happening. I do think that they're not, I don't think they're really in it for maximizing their return at all costs. The family split on that, but I do think we will be able to work with them. So between us and the Preservation Trust, we're having conversations about this. Probably one of us will put in an offer in the next month or so. Obviously, whatever we submit will be contingent on approval by the Land Bank Commission. So this will come back to you next month, almost certainly. So we'll have to take a hard look at cash flow and what this means in the context of our reserves.
Lincoln,
Yeah.
Would they be willing to take a structured deal? You
All right.
think? Do you think they'd be willing to take a structured deal, over X number of years or whatever?
I kind of doubt that, because they're really looking to close out the estate. This estate's been open for a number of years now, at least 6 or 7 years, I would say. And I think they're just really, particularly the executor wants this off his plate. So this, if we're going to go forward with this, I think it's going to be important for us to take another look at what we talked about with the Katy Mountain Development Project, namely utilizing stewardship money and basically borrowing against our stewardship fund and paying it back with interest. The auditor was not comfortable with that the last time around, but I think that with this one and also with the next one we're going to talk about, or particularly the Orcas one we're going to talk about, it's really going to be important for the commission to take a hard look at this and have the council support the commission's position if you all decide that that's something that you want to do.
Lincoln, question. I see on the map that there's a road leading to the property. Do we have clear public access all the way out?
Yeah, we really do. For one thing, the parking area at Watmow is here, and there's trail access which comes out through our properties. So we've almost got trail access to the property already. I don't think we'd look to provide driving access. I do have some concerns about this one with regard to public access, just because of the significance of the site, particularly for Native American previous use. And this is one where we could have some issues, I would say, with people coming out looking for artifacts and things like that. So I think it would be fine for public access. It's just something that we'd have to stay on top of, but no issues with providing public access.
And it looks as if those beaches are both easily accessible.
Yeah. Yeah, they really are. So it's a phenomenal site. So I actually have not been out on the property, but we definitely need to do a site visit with Lopez commissioners and other folks who are interested. So hopefully we can set that up, and we'll continue talking with them. We'll continue to talk with the Preservation Trust to see what they're capable of doing. This certainly would be a good candidate for salmon recovery funding also. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
So Lincoln, I was out there yesterday with Peggy and Amanda. We went out for a walkabout. And so I can say, I'd never been out there before, and it is a stellar site. It's fantastic in many, many aspects. And I think my main questions in trying to gain actually ownership of this site, which takes the level of responsibility up quite a bit, is the question of when, if we're talking to San Juan Preservation Trust and we're talking to our commission, but the cultural significance of that site, I'm wondering when we're talking, where are the tribes being talked to? Because their interest, I think it might be better to know their interest before we go ahead and purchase a property that becomes really complicated. So that is my first question about that. And then in terms of access and usability, it is those two pocket beaches that we saw are great for kayaks. It looks fantastic as a marine, marine access. It is a perfect place to pitch a tent or a teepee or whatever and camp out. Like the access is easy enough, and it's open, and the terrain is such that would be an interesting challenge, I think, in terms of management of that site. Because it is, even if you don't use the road, and the road to it is really not, you just can't use it. It's we could let that go, but the access from Watmau Bay, even walking or coming around by kayak, it's going to present some challenges in terms of access and people being on the site. So those are my concerns there. And I was just wondering about how salmon recovery money might restrict access to those beaches and stuff. I don't know what their criteria is for that, but anyway, that came to mind.
Yeah, I wouldn't see salmon recovery funding as being an issue with public access. In fact, one of our last big projects, which was Coho Preserve, they specifically were wanting us to provide public access to that property, which I found a little odd, frankly, but it was something that was important for them. Another possibility here is that it could become part of the national monument. I don't think that BLM is in a position to move on this quickly. So I think somebody is going to need to step up and take the property and potentially pass it on, but that could take a couple of years if that were to happen. With regard to the tribes, it's definitely something we need to check in on. At this stage, we've been more concerned with just trying to get the property under contract potentially, so it doesn't hit the open market. With our concern being if it hits the open market, we could quickly get priced out of it. That might not happen, but it could also. It's just much safer if we can get it prior to it being listed, which also gives the family the benefit of not having to pay commissions on the sale.
What do you think the family would feel about getting, if we bought a conservation easement on it? Yeah, what do you think about that?
The family, there are, I think, at least 5 or 6 members of the family, and they really are split. There are a couple of them who are very interested, and they are actually living in the house, which is, as far as I understand it, not all that great. It's not in great condition, but the 2 folks who are living there really wanted to do a conservation easement and stay on the property. Their issue though was they just could not afford to put in the amount of money that they'd need to have purchased the underlying fee with the easement on top of it.
Don't you think a conservation easement in this market, that property is going to sell? That property is going to sell, and I'm wondering if a conservation easement was placed on it prior to it going up for sale, they might get less money for it because of extinguishing something. Or are we worried about them tearing down that house and putting a mega mansion on the house, on the property?
Yeah, well, I think that obviously, if that's the big danger here, if it goes on the open market with no easement or anything, almost certainly there's going to be a significant house or 2 on this property.
Oh, here they are.
We could put it in, we could do a conservation easement. I don't think the family, I think it would be very difficult for us to negotiate with all of the family members the terms of a conservation easement and for them to agree to taking less money. It would really require the other family members who want to stay to buy out the rest of the family members. And I just don't think they have the resources to do that. So I think this is, we're looking at a fee acquisition here. I don't see the easement potential. It could be that we purchased this and then resold it with a conservation easement. Of course, that would mean the family was not able to stay there, but it would also mean less management obligation for us.
Are they,
Lincoln, it sounds to me like you are putting this property as a priority ahead of any other properties that we are looking at. Is that a fair statement?
Well, this is, I would say, a very high priority property. It's one that's been on our radar for quite some time. So it's definitely, I think it'd be really important for us to take a hard look at it. I think it would be really pretty tragic if we weren't able to protect this piece. But having said that, yes, this is a competition with scarce resources. So, that's going to be up to you all.
well, if the REIT continues the way it's been, that would be good.
So if I could make a few comments and an idea. So the conservation easement, I guess we're kind of done with that conversation, but you had said it only had the potential for 2 residences. So extinguishing one residence, I just don't really see the value in us buying a conservation easement. Everything that you've shown me, to me, it looks like a must do keystone kind of a piece of a project. Even if we don't know exactly how future ownership might be or protection of resources, I'd hate to see this let go. And I also want to caution that there are quite a number of sales happening before things are hitting the market. So I wouldn't use that as our timeline. Word gets out. I'm having sellers receive letters from people off the island saying, look, we're trying to get in. We really like your piece. And so I really think that if it's something we want to do, time is of the essence. There would be a period of time to figure some things out, but I would like to get it personally, like to see it locked down. I realize that we have other projects, but this one looks great. And then the other option, the other thought to talk about would be, since there is a residence on it, I understand it's not maybe in great shape, but it is habitable. And with some of the concerns that Krista brought up between potential just beach access and camping and cultural resources, what about potentially the idea of having a caretaker on the property, using the residence just as a management tool? Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, we'd have to look at the condition of the house. I think there are lots of questions about it. Because, for them, obviously, they can live in it in a certain condition. For us, though, we're going to be obligated to bring it up to certain standards. So
it could be a summer house for a summer caretaker, like a seasonal caretaker, not someone necessarily. You want someone there during the peak usage times in the winter, dead of winter. You wouldn't necessarily. I don't think it doesn't sound very hospitable for wintertime living, but potentially high use season caretaker might be a possibility there.
And then possibly even these current occupants could stay until November 1st or something like that. Okay.
Lincoln, this looks like a fantastic opportunity, terrific property. But we need to consider the complications. And I personally think that if this property were to come without the opportunity for public access, then it's not worth it for us. I think that the complications that Krista mentioned with stewarding the property and also dealing with the tribes, those are things we can take on, at the time necessary. But I think we should definitely consider it with public access and find a way to do that. And if we can, wonderful property, terrific opportunity.
Yeah, that's a good point, Brian. I would say that I think the Samish have the principal interest in this particular site. How would they feel about public access? Probably they're not going to be terribly thrilled about it. So if that's the case, and if we're moving in that direction, it may be something that's more appropriate as part of the national monument. I'm just not sure. There are lots of questions still, but I agree. If we're going to own it, having public access to it is going to be critical.
Yep. And if that's the case, maybe the Samish should.
I'm sorry, I missed that last part, Brian.
I said, if that's the case, maybe the Samish should buy and own it.
All right, so what I'm getting from you is a consensus that we should go ahead and see what kind of deal we can strike on this and get it under contract and bring it back to you at the next meeting.
Yes.
Yep. Lincoln, I don't know if you mentioned what you think the price is for this.
Yeah, so they're contemplating listing it at 2.5. That's about all I'm willing to say at this point. We'll see what we might be able to do with that. If we want to talk further about that, I would suggest we come back in executive session to do that.
Okay. Doug has a hand up. Doug McCutcheon.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out, that suggestion of the Samish buying it. Maybe there is some interest there, and there could be a joint project of some sort. We do have the cultural resource part of our mandate, and this could be an interesting opportunity to explore some other creative options, including on the management front. If it's a challenging place for us to manage and whatnot, maybe this is an opportunity for looking at some sort of a management sort of a strategy. So, that's all. Thanks.
Looks like a camas field to me.
Right. All right, are we ready to move on? Actually, maybe I will stop for a minute here. I saw that Christine had joined. So maybe we should take a break because I know she's got to head off early as well. So maybe we can pause and let her do her update.
Okay, that sounds good. Christine, would you like to go ahead and give your council update?
Well,
just have to unmute.
I am here.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I am multitasking. It's been a rough morning. But TGIF, right?
Right.
And for the record, I was caught in that Elf Island tragedy of ferry situation yesterday. So I got home extremely late last night. But I suppose that's neither here nor there. Anyway, I am on my phone and out in public, so I am just going to stay off video. But thank you for pausing and giving me this time. Let's see. Some fun that I had in relation to Land Bank in the last 2 weeks was a really long and delightful visit to Zylstra with Doug McCutcheon. I really enjoyed the opportunity to see that preserved through his eyes, and certainly learned a whole lot that I didn't know or wouldn't otherwise been able to surmise myself. It was 2.5 hours of a whole lot of learning, and I would have never seen that eagle's nest, I don't think, unless I was taking the trail sort of in reverse of what I think would you would usually. It was amazing. In other news, I am attending this afternoon, and the reason I have to leave early, the mural dedication on Orcus. And so if anybody on this call or in this meeting is interested, that's at noon at the Orcus Ferry Landing. And I think that Mr. Stevens is also going to be there. I don't think Mrs. Wolf will be there, but it is going to be a lovely opportunity. I will just say, as you all probably likely know and are aware, but I still think very exciting and important, is that our county vaccination program has reached almost or just past the 70% vaccination rate, at least for initiating vaccines. And at this time, and I think for about the last 2 weeks, that has made us the #1 county in terms of vaccination. And now that we have sort of transitioned our focus to the youth, we're just getting really close to where we wish, I suspect, all counties and states were, because there is a light there at the end of the tunnel. And I have my second dose on Monday, which I'm really excited about, despite the fact that there's a meeting on Tuesday, because I might have to do it from bed.
Yeah, you
Council
might.
meeting. I know. I'm sorry that I am a little bit, disoriented in a sense because of my multitasking, but suffice it to say that all things are going as well as can be expected in the council world. And and absolutely congratulations 100 times on Katy Mountain closing. I am really very pleased about that for all of you and for all of us.
Great.
Anybody have any questions?
I'd like a bulgogi, please.
I don't think I'm ever going to live that down. Ever. But in nature of goodwill, I appreciate it, and I'm really glad that it's part of my legacy.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you, Sandy.
Thank you, Christine, very much for joining us when you have so much going on, and congrats to our county for the high vaccination rate. That's awesome.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right, Lincoln, do you want to pick up, or actually, do you want to pick up and then finish up your part, and then we'll do our break?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So here we are, next project. This is on Lopez again, and this is the Top of the World project, which you see outlined in yellow. It may, and there are multiple parcels. There's a lot going on now, but basically what's happening is that there were some offers made on the property. The folks who are really working hard to see the property conserved have found donors to put in backup offers. But we're really not sure how this is going to play out. I think that this is a great opportunity for us potentially to have a property with that great view. We have big questions about access. And of course, the commission has not had any conversation about contributing to this process, to this project, period. And we really don't know whether that would be required. It may be that the community is able to raise enough money so that this is something that's just given to us. But I do think it's an important piece. It may not rise to the level of the commission wanting to put money into it to acquire it, but it would be a good resource provided there's good public access to the top. There's the road that goes up, but it goes through another development. And so there's a question about getting a new easement, basically specifically allowing for public access. So we're kind of in a wait and see mode on this one, but a lot of people are working really hard to try and pull it together. I'll keep you updated. I think that's all I've got. I don't know if anyone who's working on the project has anything to add at this point. So I'll just open that up. I know Megan's been working really hard on this. I don't know, Megan, if you've got an update that you want to offer briefly.
I think you pretty much said it. We've had a couple very generous folks from the community come forward. So at this stage, the financial possibility of saving it is less a concern. The ability to grant public access to it is more of a concern. We pretty much have the support of the neighbors in the development down below and their willingness to grant public access. But as you see, there are a number of parcels that make up the top. And so the question of which pending sales close and which do not, and are the new owners willing to potentially grant a public access easement, that will determine whether we can move forward. So I will keep you in the loop, and thank you so much for being so informative and helpful up to this point.
Was the property being offered as one outlined in yellow? Or is it, because it looks like there's multiple parcels. Is there multiple buyers currently involved in different pieces of it?
It was previously offered as one. It has since been relisted as individual lots. The owners are really hot to trot, hoping to sell this off. So there are a few different pending sales on separate lots at the moment.
Megan, what is the development potential of the property?
The development potential in terms of like a housing development?
How many houses?
It could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Each of the lots you see there, except for the little square in the lower right.
This is a community lot.
Correct.
This lot, I think, is already under different ownership. Isn't that right, Megan?
Yes. Yes.
So we're talking about the remainder here, with the principal view area being, somewhere in here.
That's right. And in particular, it looks like we may have a good shot at the upper 2 of the horizontal rectangles in the middle section.
So these two.
And for anybody who's been up there, there's a beautiful picnic table and an iconic view spot in that upper rectangle. That's what most folks think of when they remember Top of the World.
I'd love to see a picture of the view at some point.
Picture.
And did you tell us earlier that this connects to an existing community trail network?
So
Yes.
there are trails. This is the Preservation Trust Beecher Preserve. And this is the, I forget the name of the development here, but this is their association property. So there's a connection through here. Some of these owners too are also very interested in trail connection. So there's some good potential for trail connectivity. And I'm pretty sure that the Lopez Community Trails Network is the most politically powerful trails committee I've ever seen.
Wow.
Big
This
group
is
of,
a site that is adjacent to the historical route for the Walkabout, the yearly event where folks walk from the top to the bottom of Lopez. And there is a whole pre-existing network of trails that go out to Midnight's Farm and Center Road to the eastern side. So yes.
So it seems that if we have the opportunity, that maybe an appropriate participation would be in a conservation easement to extinguish development rights as opposed to land bank ownership. What do you think, Lincoln?
well,
Go ahead, Lincoln.
So it would be like a Yahaya type.
I don't know that there's an organization willing to step in to take ownership of the property. I think if the community is able to raise enough money, I can see this as kind of a pocket preserve. I mean, realistically, it might be a more appropriate county parks property. It's kind of more like that. But of course, they don't have the resources to purchase anything and are not eager to take on anything new. So this may just be, this could potentially be one for us that's kind of like East Sound Waterfront Park, something along those lines.
Thank you.
All right. I'm ready to move on to a different island. So here we are on Orcas Island and the Glenwood Inn property, which we've now done a site visit. A number of folks have gotten down there independently. This is the one, if you remember, where it's also in an estate situation, with the bad news being that the representative for the estate is obligated to get top dollar. But we were out there with him, talked to him about the potential. It does not seem like they're in any position to move quickly on this because he's dealing with many other properties that were part of the estate, and he's trying to deal with those first. And also thinks that there's a lot of issues with this one, which would need to be rectified before they were willing to go forward with the sale. It probably would have to be listed. So that's kind of the good and bad news. We've got some time, but it's not going to come cheap. One of the big virtues of this property is its relation to Point Doty. There's a private parcel in between the two, but the tidelands here are public. This owner also has no visible access point actually down to the beach. There's about I would say 50-foot bluff / cliff here. So it's really tough to get down to the beach. That's the other great virtue of this property, in that there is a road that comes down to serve. There are 3 cabins that are down on the beach. So you've got built-in public access potential. And just a closer view of it, this large structure, there's a main house. This was an addition. Construction was halted at a certain point on this, and I think it's been open to the elements for quite some time. So our feeling is this is probably not salvageable. Maybe part of it could be, I don't know. And then you've got these 2 cabins there and then 3 cabins down on the beach here. They're all pretty worn. Some of them might be salvageable. I don't know. This is a garage slash storage building that's pretty new. So that's in good condition. The whole site here, 58 acres. So it could be put into, I think, 11 different parcels. Since it's R5 zoning, there's a third of them. Oh, sorry, I keep doing that. There's a third of a mile of beachfront here, and the beach is really pretty diverse. It's sandy over here, and then it gets progressively rocky. Some really interesting geological features to it. This is just the context of this property in relation to our existing preserves, Crescent Beach, Terrell Beach, Stonebridge Terrell rather, Judd Cove, Fowler's Knob and Pond, and conservation easements held by either the trust or the land bank. The really critical thing here, going back to it, is the fact that Point Doty, which is a natural area preserve held by the Department of Natural Resources, has no public access. You can kayak to it, that's about it. And getting this would give us that potential. So even though this one is going to be quite expensive, it's really a 2-for-1, frankly, if we were able to pull it off. So just a shot of the beach, looking out toward Canada in the distance there. And then closer up, you can see there's a rocky shoreline, and this bluff cliff going down, that's Point Doty out here. Another shot, I pulled this one off the web. I don't know who was kayaking out here, but it certainly happens. That's another piece too also. Just looking at it in this context, there's a pretty significant demand for kayakers to have a base of operation to get out to Paydos or Susha or Matia, Mesha. And now all they have is road ends basically on the north shore of Orcas. There's no real provision for people to park their cars overnight if they want to go on a kayaking trip. So it's another potential significant recreational opportunity. So having said all that, we're not sure what the price is going to be on this. And we've kind of kicked that around a bit. My guess is minimum 3 million, probably more like 4, but we don't know. So take that number with a grain of salt. The Preservation Trust has been looking at this also, so they're actively soliciting for donors for this project. If we were to try and do it without Preservation Trust partnership, we'd be eligible to apply for Washington Wildlife and Recreation Program water access funding, and also Aquatic Lands Enhancement Account funding. I think this would be a very, very strong proposal. And I think we could get at least a couple of million, frankly, from those sources. That's a bet, But I've been through a lot of these projects now, and I can tell you this is definitely going to be a strong one. The reality here is that, you know, Orcas has some access points to the shoreline. The only beach they've got is Crescent Beach, which isn't very long. Adding this as a shoreline access point would just be unbelievable. I don't know. I don't have words to describe it, quite honestly. I think this would be just one of the most significant acquisitions we've ever done, quite frankly. So hard for me to put it any stronger than that. So where we are now is really just trying to beat the bushes and see, you know, what's the trust capable of doing. We also talked to Orcas Island Parks and Rec. They potentially could do a capital levy for this. We're not sure where they're standing. I think they're more oriented toward doing athletic fields than something like a beach access project, but still part of the conversation. So we've got some potential partners out there. And we'll have to see. You know, I don't think we're going to be in a position to make an offer on this for another 3 months, I would say, minimum. So we've got some time to try and pull together a partnership and see what kind of funding we can come up with. But definitely one that is well worth investigating and continuing to hope for. So I will stop there.
Lincoln,
Yeah.
do you need any kind of decision or consensus to move forward with this? Or have we already done that?
Well, I think it'd be good. I think we've kind of already done that, but I think it'd be good to have a reaffirmation. I mean, obviously, between this one and the Lopez one, we're going to have to look at what we've got in terms of cash on hand and the potential for borrowing against stewardship to make these things work. But and I think we should come back at the next meeting and probably really have an executive session to talk about numbers in a more realistic sense, and really take a close look at the commission's comfort level at doing one or both of these.
Perhaps we could look at another cash flow spreadsheet. Right. Yeah, okay.
And is there anything that we can do to help the council be more comfortable with the concept of borrowing against our own funds and making payments to ourselves? Anything that?
Yeah, you know, I think that's a good conversation to have with council members. At this point, I don't know that you necessarily even have to tie it to a specific project, but I think just getting them to a place where they're comfortable with that approach. And after all, what we've been talking about for the sake of people who haven't been following this conversation is the fact that we have stewardship funds that we've set aside in the eventuality that we're not reauthorized and have to switch over to stewardship only. We have a fund that will allow us to do that for some period of time. But in the interim, those funds basically sit there. The interest rates we're earning are, you know, 0.1, 0.2%. So we're essentially earning zero interest on those. If there's a way for us to take those funds with a clear repayment plan through 2026, which is when the current authorization expires, and pay it back with interest, then it's kind of putting that money to work rather than having it just sit there. So that's the idea. And certainly that's a much better option than borrowing outside of the organization, getting a property on terms with a landowner. We'd rather pay ourselves interest than somebody else.
Like borrowing from your 401. Brian, go ahead.
Lincoln, I'd suggest that we also consider the other possibility, which is bonding. I know council turned that down a couple of years ago, but with the proviso that if there were an opportunity and we really needed it, that they might consider that. That was a different council, of course, but because interest rates are what they are or aren't right now, this might be a really good time to consider going for a bond for one or more major purchases.
Another option.
Okay, so thank you. Go ahead.
I have a question. Lincoln,
I'm
on
sorry, I
the
didn't see.
on the aerial of the Glenwood property, it looks like the neighbor's driveway is shared, like the driveway comes onto that property and then veers to the northwest to go to the neighbors. Is there any issue with that?
So you're correct. The neighbor's driveway comes off of their driveway. So I haven't looked at this easement. I'm sure they have one, but that's their only entrance point to their property. I'll have to investigate that further. Obviously, we've got a lot of due diligence that we'd have to go through with this one.
Okay, thank you.
Peter's already offered to take down all the structures and deal with that. So that's fine. Sorry.
Yeah,
Okay, so 10, it's 10. We're a little bit behind schedule, but we'll go ahead and take a, can we just do a 5-minute break to help us catch up? Yeah, let's do that. So we'll come back at 10:05. Thank you.
thanks.
You're muted, Sandy.
Yes, I see. We're just waiting for Doug to come back, but give him another minute here. Another fantastic stewardship report, by the way.
Mhm.
Really just amazing.
I concur. It was really, really good. It was like reading an informative non-fictional book about stewardship.
Yes, very well written. Thank you. Aaron, do you make it user-friendly? You're muted.
My audio isn't working.
No.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay, so these weren't working. Yeah, I put together most of the stewards' reports and organize it, but there can always be a last minute contribution that I don't edit or whatnot, but everybody has been great about contributing.
It's really, really very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're all back. We'll call the meeting back in session at 10:08 and go ahead and start off with the stewardship reports. Anything additional that the stewards want to add or discuss? Or questions for the stewards?
I have a question.
Yeah, yes.
How do they manage to do everything that they're doing? I mean, reading the reports, the reports are incredible. I just, we are so fortunate. I just can't believe that in the period of time that you have, you're just doing such a wonderful job.
Yep.
Yes.
I agree.
Second that.
Thank you all. David, had you raised your hand a second ago or no? No. Okay. Well, I guess the reports were so thorough. We don't have much more to talk about other than great job, really great job. Yes. Hi, Doug.
Do one quick addition.
Yes.
We had the neighborhood meeting for the Beaverton Preserve on this week sometime. I don't remember what day. Was that Wednesday? I think it was Wednesday. And it was pretty lightly attended. It was just really targeted at the neighborhood located off of Halverson Road on San Juan Island. But really good engagement, really great questions, and have had a bunch of follow-up from that meeting. Conversations with 2 or 3 neighbors, emails from 2 or 3 neighbors, and there's 2 that have already committed to helping with not just weed control and or 3 actually. So yeah, just wanted to report that went really quite well, and it's really great having on board to be helping us with all of this planning effort. Just changing gears, yeah, in terms of getting stuff done, I just would recognize all of the rest of the folks that I'm so lucky to work with here. Sean and Jacob have just been kicking butt out there. Like I say, this time of year, it just feels like the mowing, it just is never ending. It's like you get done mowing and you turn around and it's already time to mow again. So it's a bit of a kind of challenge. So a lot of gratitude for their work.
Hey, Doug, I was going to ask you too about the NNRG forest workshops that are happening at Beaverton. What's the plan with that? That's pretty cool that if they do it there. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
I think Peter participated in one on Orcas, or maybe just had Kirk visit with him on Turtleback. I'm not exactly sure. And he passed on Kirk Hansen from NNRG to me, and gosh, Beaverton just seems like it's the perfect site. I mean, we have a little bit of everything there, and so the plan, I believe that workshop is the 2nd week of June, and on June 1st right now, I'm scheduled to have Carson Springer over to walk the LSR grant on Katy Mountain, or excuse me, Mount Grant. And we're also going to try and go out and select the site for the NRG stuff at Beaverton. It sounds like the plan there is just to, I'll be marking off 4 1/10 acre plots and demonstrating everything from, how to evaluate and mark a plot, showing a plot that's already been marked up. They'll do some work in one of the plots to show it's sort of already complete. And then during the workshop, they'll actually do some finished work in the last plot. So that's the plan as I understand it so far. In the neighborhood meeting, I'll say that was really well received. We had questions about, largely about fire safety, but a little bit about habitat, and that this workshop was being presented, and things as a signal that we intend to be improving things out there was very well received. And we actually have, I think we had 6 or 7 participants in the meeting, and 2 of those have now signed up for that workshop. So it's great.
So the Northwest Natural Resources Group functions as basically a kind of a resource for forest landowners to help manage their property. So in this case, this is a great opportunity for us just to get a head start on some of the thinning work and forestry we might want to do on our property, and give us a sense of how they would approach it. So it'll help us carry forward what we need to do on that property as well.
Good. Okay, thank you again. Let's move on to the outreach and volunteer report. Tanya.
Well, we're going to be waiting for a long time if we're waiting.
Is Tanya here?
She's not. She is in New York.
Okay, well, there's a.
I think she put quite a bit of effort in the written format, so.
Okay.
She's away.
Right. Got it. So, right, the big thing was community conversations that went off so well, and then where are we on checking to make sure that any outstanding questions or concerns that got brought up have been answered? Do we have a handle on that, Lincoln? I see you nodding your head, so yeah.
Yeah, I think we do. We'll be coming back to you with those. In addition, we're in the middle of the annual report preparation, so that's coming along pretty well at this point. So those are the big things we're working on.
Great. And do you get a letter from does the annual report have a chair, like the previous chair write a letter? So Krista's already working on that. Okay, got it. Okay, then let's move on to Kaufelt Farm Management. We have several different topics within this section here. So we're first going to begin with a continued discussion with any CART members present. The commissioners gathered questions based on the CART report, and I was shocked to see that really it looks like every single question got answered. And that must have taken a lot of time, so thank you very much. And it's actually helpful to have it in writing that we can go back. But so based on those questions, do commissioners have additional follow-up to engage with the CART representatives that are here?
Are there any CART representatives here? I didn't see any.
Well, I see Kathy is here, and let me look at the rest.
Sorry,
Brooke is
Kathy.
here.
Okay.
Kate's here. Yeah, we've been number one.
Yes.
And Rob Roy.
Well, I'd just like to say that I thought that the answers to the questions were very thorough and right to the point. And without getting into further questions myself right now, I'd like to propose a resolution to thank the CART members for all their work. I thought that the CART report and the public meeting and the answers gave us a whole lot to think about, and were very, very helpful. So I'd like to say thank you, CART.
Second.
And a third, I share those views. I thought it was, not only was the report very helpful, but I think that especially Krista and Sandy's questions and the answers that were done very thoughtful on both sides. In fact, for me, extremely informative and helpful.
Yeah, I would express surprise and great appreciation for the number of answers to questions, because it gave, not every single question was answered by multiple people, but many of them were. And so having different perspectives, even from within the CART team, was really helpful. I appreciate and was somewhat intimidated by the additional links that I was provided, but I went down some of those rabbit holes too. And I've just learned a tremendous amount. And I have a couple, these answers have generated some additional questions for me, but nothing along the lines of my dissertation that I originally sent out. So maybe less than half a dozen.
Well, we have time allotted for those questions. Krista, if you want to go ahead and put them out here and we can.
Well, they're not really substantive
Okay.
from the standpoint of, although there were like one of them, I guess I was kind of puzzled by the statement that, and I just needed clarification on the LUMS, the process that they're currently going through in order to do maintenance and upkeep is onerous. I don't know what that means. So I was kind of curious to know if there was a way to get some insight into that. And then I just have some additional questions on clarity for equipment sharing and what the concept was from, or the thought was from the CART group on whether we own all the equipment and share that out, or were they open to, because I followed a couple of those links to lending libraries and equipment rentals. And there are a number of places it looks like that Caulfield, the property could serve as a holding area for shared equipment, but farmers have created their own co-ops to purchase and maintain and lend out. And so I'm wondering whether the perception was, or the thinking was, Caulfield Farm itself, the entity would buy and purchase and share the equipment, or could we fulfill some of that need by agreeing to house these pieces of equipment that were actually, you know, kind of supervised and managed by a farmer co-op of interested farmers who wanted to have that equipment available to them. So that was another question. And then just about farm worker housing, are we envisioning housing for farm workers on Caulfield Farm, or are we envisioning was CART envisioning a broader opportunity to provide farm worker housing for people who are working on a variety of farms? Just, I wasn't sure what the scope was on that.
Yeah, that was a.
That was 3.
That was, okay, several. For your first question about the task of maintenance being onerous, maybe we should hear from Amy Lum, who's here, and she would probably be the best one to explain the process, what's feeling bogged down. Amy, if you could answer that part. Give us a sample, an example or something.
So yeah, I think the challenge of getting things done, sometimes you need it, because we're obviously just renting, so it's for some of the bigger infrastructure things like electricity, power, wiring, lights, to have upgrades to the wiring, lighting in the barn, for example. You know, getting the county electrician to come, not being able to necessarily, would there be a way to set it up in the future for whoever is the farmer here to contract, to figure out how to do certain repairs without going through the land bank and waiting for the electrician to come, or building fence repairs, or building fences, who just figuring out if you need 3 bids to have a project done, is there a way for the lessee to, especially if they're a contractor, contractor's license and bonded and all that, to be able to put into the lease that they could do that work without having to go through all of the multiple bid processes. Sometimes just getting little things done, there's just a long chain of, asking and checking, and then there's an added layer of county in between the lessee and the property owner for getting projects done. Peter, am I being articulate? I'm not sure I'm being very articulate about that, but it seems like sometimes we just get bogged down in the bureaucracy of trying to figure out how to get things done.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're speaking well about it. We're subject to all the county procurement rules and projects, capital improvement projects on the farm or prevailing wage projects, and it takes a little time. And I think finding efficiencies, if possible, in a future lease agreement might be, a way to help that. But I don't have any immediate solutions. But yeah, it's like any publicly owned buildings or property. It takes some time to get the appropriate bids and get the contracts through the process. I know it's frustrating for you sometimes.
Is that something that could be worked out through a lease agreement? Is there, I don't know if that's even a possibility. Everybody's saying yes. Okay. That would be good.
Just a thought to how to streamline the way for sometimes just minor projects or bigger projects, the way, and we've been sort of learning as we go, being a separate private entity leasing the land of how the process works. So it's been figuring it all out over this term of the lease, but for a long-term lease going forward, to somehow simplify how improvements can be done and who's responsible for what.
Hey, Amy, since we have you here, and I'm sorry that I haven't checked in with you over the past year or so, just to hear things are going. And if you wouldn't mind just kind of giving a synopsis of like what's happening on the farm, maybe with respect to some of the questions that we have been fielding or asking about things like how's your water supply, how's the how's the grazing going, like how's the housing going, just like these general things that we're curious about, and it seems like you're the person for that right now. So do you mind just doing like a little summary of what's going on?
So things on the farm are going really, really well. There's a lot going on here. So I feel like this year we have really kind of hit our stride with figuring out where everything is and good systems and management practices for rotational grazing and how to manage all the separate animal groups. The main barn and the new heavy use area that's going really, really well, super efficient. And so all the animals are thriving, they're doing really well. There's lots of projects to be done, fence mending, and it's a big project, the farm. The infrastructure of the farm is a big project, and just farming it is also a really big project, but we are enjoying it. Having the additional tiny house in place and more or less functional. We still it doesn't have water in it yet, but it does have power now. And the water, it just needs Eric to hook it up, I think. So that's been really helpful to have that. As far as the house, I think that's going fine. We're kind of own self-do-it folks, so we tend to try and do it just if we see something that needs fixing, minor little things. We're just trying to do that as we go along. But basically, yeah, I don't know.
Well,
questions.
well, as far as farm production goes, where are you at? Where are you now with what you're doing for production on the farm, and where do you want to be?
So when we started here in 2019, we were at a certain point, and then in doing our summary for the grant that we got last year, we have increased food production from what we were able to do before. The systems it works so well, the efficiency of having all of our farm in one place versus on multiple patches of property all over the island, and the amount of time we don't have to drive around. We have increased our production tremendously. So we are providing food to, we have online pickup service for meat, so people can order online and come pick it up here, and we're providing to restaurants. The dairy is up and going, and that's really getting into full swing. Last year with the pandemic, we had to wait several months before we could get all our inspection and approvals to actually sell the cheese. So we lost half of the season due to the delays of getting inspected. But we're up and running now. So I anticipate that production will increase a lot. Yeah, I'm just getting, it feels good to have a place to be. People know where to find us. We can, we have stability just being in one place and having a network of vendors and customers. So I think we've probably increased our production. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's, from before we moved here, but that was also our goal, was to increase our production, probably 200% from what we were doing before we came here. So we've got beef, pork. We never were able to do hogs before. We didn't have a place to do that. Lamb, goat, both for meat and the dairy. Got all the stuff in the farm store is things we produce here on the farm. Cheese.
Amy,
yeah.
I'm gonna thank you for providing all that information. That's
I'm rambling.
No, that's okay, and we do know a lot of that, and I think it was a valid question for Miles to answer. I'm just watching the clock, and we have about another 15 minutes allotted to get some questions answered by the CART committee. So thank you for providing that background. Kathy, you have.
I would just say, Miles, come to the farm. Come walk through.
Hi.
Okay.
I just would like to point out that on the agenda, at 10:15, it said continued discussion with the Cloudfelt Agricultural Resource Team, which is really the Conservation Agricultural Resource Team, 30 minutes. And that the questions or the added discussion about CART has been skirted into a report about how the farm is. And Amy, all due respect, this was not what the time was for. And I know there were questions where there were conflicting answers. And so I was hoping for an opportunity to discuss more some of the specific questions where I felt like there were discrepancies in the responses that CART members asked. This wasn't going to be about a time with like how much production is at the farm and how it's working out for the current lessee, because
that's Kathy, let me stop you. So let's go ahead and shift into it.
Okay, so what I'm saying is like I know there was some questions like, what is agriculture? Like, what are some agricultural goals and what are some things as a county we're looking for? And so I just was hoping that those questions we were going to start answering, like, and now I'm kind of flustered because this conversation is not about the CART report. It's about what's happening at the farm currently, which are two different.
Okay, Kathy, I'm stopping you because we're actually now taking up more time not talking about what we're going to talk about. So let's move on to back to those CART questions. Krista had several more questions that she wanted to get answered by CART. So I want to steer it back in that direction. I recognize my responsibility. I let it get off track here and was trying
I'm gonna interject. I'm sorry. I think there is a really big value in understanding what's happening with the farm now. The questions that we as a commission have been asking of CART have to do, what do we do with this farm? What's happening there now is helping to answer those questions. I think it's really valuable to know what is going on, what's working, what isn't. I'm sorry that Amy and Eric were excluded from the process of CART in contributing their information. But to me as a commissioner, knowing what works on the land, what doesn't, what needs to happen is very important. So I think that the contribution that Amy's making is not just talking about how great her day is, it's actually contributing in a way that helps us move forward. So I'm sorry that it doesn't, mesh with your idea, but that was my thought behind it. So
I think we agree with that. I think what we need to do is allow a slot in the agenda for a Q&A with the LUMs as current lessees, but we didn't have that on the agenda for this time. So I agree with you, Miles. I think we have important information to learn. And so, but we've asked CART to attend to be able to answer these other questions. So let's go ahead and continue on with that. So I'm saying everybody here is right. Let's move on and back to Krista. Krista, I've lost track now of what you're.
Well, one of the questions and it's easily answered, I think, are for the equipment rental, is that was the sense that Coffell Farm itself would be purchasing the equipment, or was there an openness to providing space and potentially, location of equipment, that a farmer co-op or some other entity could be the one responsible for coming up with agreements and maintenance among the people who are using it? It's just for clarification. I don't need detail on how it all happens, but I'm just kind of curious as to the continuum that we were looking at there.
Okay, looks like Brooke is going to answer that.
I can start with an attempt at an answer, and I think I will say, at least from my perspective, I don't know that we narrowed down to that specific level, and that there's with any of this, there's a spectrum of options. The land bank could own and rent or lease out equipment. Much of that equipment it owns currently, and so it could lease that out in different fashions. You could potentially partner with another organization that may be better set up for doing that kind of work. Maybe it's the Conservation District, maybe it's an organization like the Northwest Ag Business Center, or maybe that is handled by the lessee, whether that's a private farm or a nonprofit organization. They could potentially have part of their responsibility to manage at least of some of that equipment or sharing of some of that equipment. So I think, from my view, and I think at this point we're kind of, I'm not sure if that reflects everybody's view, but that's one perspective.
And then similar on the housing, was the interest, is the need, or was there a sense on the group that the housing was to provide farm worker housing for that particular property itself? Or were they envisioning farm worker housing, like partnering with affordable housing on Orcas to provide housing for farm workers on a variety of farms? Just kind of curious what you guys might have talked about there.
try and go again quickly, and then other folks are welcome to chime in. I think we talked about both those things as potential opportunities that, you know, if depending on various restrictions, land use, et cetera, you know, if you could house workers for other farms, that might be an opportunity to support the community more general, given the housing shortage and challenge for farm workers. And then certainly our understanding historically is that, you know, access to farm, you know, functional farm worker housing at Kaufeld Farm was a challenge for previous operations. So just recognizing that challenge and trying to figure out ways that could be addressed moving forward.
Thank you.
Other commissioners with questions for CART?
There's a hand raised, Sandy.
I'm sorry, I don't have that on my screen. Yes, Rob Roy, yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to jump in with regards to the equipment storage or the housing questions. I think it will be kind of important to work within the terms of the conservation easement. For instance, the easement allows for 3 single-family residences, but then also farm worker housing in accordance with some of the county regulations for farm worker housing. So there are opportunities within the easement for that, but there's also some limitations within the easement for the number of structures that can be used for housing under the current regulations. And then also for the equipment storage, and there was also a discussion of a food hub. I think those things definitely have a pretty clear agricultural benefit for the community, but there are also some restrictions within the easement about industrial uses of the property and warehouses. And I think that that will just kind of require further discussion about maybe the scale and siting and some more details for working within the terms of the conservation easement.
Thank you. That's good to know.
Okay. Kathy, do you still have your hand raised, or is it a new hand
No,
raised?
this is a new one. One of the questions that came up in the questionnaire was about the difference between community benefit and public benefit, and the educational opportunities that were earlier at the farm as to what is expected now. And so I have one question for the commissioners. Did we answer those questions appropriately? And 2, here's just a quick paragraph I found about public benefit from a letter that Lincoln wrote to Joe Simon in 2010. I'm just going to read it real quick. The stewards will ensure the operations continue as seamlessly as possible, and also that public benefit accrues back to the community in the form of providing locally grown food, educational programs, and opportunities for young farmers to work the land. So that was just something that might help with that understanding of what public benefit. I mean, we weren't really making a difference. We were just using them interchangeably. So does that help? Krista?
For me, the interchangeable part didn't help because you had two different questions on your survey, and one was talking about public benefit and one was talking about community benefit. So I was looking for a way to differentiate those. And Kate, I don't know how Kate pronounces her last name. McCulloch? McCulloch. She gave an answer that was quite helpful, and she quoted the same Kyle Freeman that I think you mentioned in your answer, but I don't think, I was a bit confused because I don't think they can be used interchangeably, and your survey didn't really do that, but her description of it helped me quite a bit. So Kate, thank you for that. Yeah, because I think there is a difference in their scope and ways of meeting each of those, but yeah, so now I have a better understanding. I don't know, I can't speak for the other commissioners, but
That helped clarify it for me too. I mean, I think there's crossover, but then there's some additional outlying, public benefit could be someone driving down the road and enjoying the view, but community benefit is more like investing back into the community that makes our community richer, more resilient, and brings it together. That's kind of what I'm seeing, but I think either way, we're looking to achieve public and community benefits.
And so I guess the big question is, of all the models that were presented, like thinking what kind of public benefit then, or I'm going to use them interchangeably to the, like in his letter, to the community in the form of, what forums that you feel are important to our community.
I think it's I think we're into semantics, and we recognize that what we're looking to provide is benefit beyond benefiting a small group of either a single farmer or even just the farming community. We're looking to provide wider benefits. So I think that's been our goal. Yeah. Brian, you look like you wanted to.
No comment at this point, Sandy. Thanks.
Oh, okay. All right. So
I'll
let's
just
see.
say one more little comment that's kind of a Wendell Berry quote that I like. Eating is an agricultural act. So, I mean, when you're thinking about how does agriculture affect other people, even just eating is an agricultural act. I like that quote.
Thank you.
So I'm kind of curious if other commissioners have additional questions about this, since we have CART people on the call, because I think that is part of this discussion now, since we have them, to get some clarification. Yeah, so I'm kind of curious if there are other questions from our commission.
Well, I have a question. So CART is going to be an ongoing organization working to promote agriculture in the San Juans after they have moved past Caulfield. I don't think Caulfield is the only project that CART's going to take on. It's going to take on others. So I could be wrong. I don't know. But that was part of the discussion at some point.
News to me.
Oh, it's news to you? Well, I don't. Okay, so if it's a formation of the land bank, then maybe this is it for it. But in your estimation, is the success of Caulfield as a community resource, as a way of keeping ag land going, dependent on it being owned by the land bank? Or could another owner take over and it be just as successful at an ecological farming community resource?
Good question. Anyone from CART like to answer that?
Brooke?
I can try. I mean, I think in my view, and I don't know that my view is particularly helpful, because I think it depends. And I think that, yes, a lot of these questions are really broadly theoretical. I think that absolutely another owner could manage that in a way that has public and community benefits. There's plenty of other organizations that manage public farmland with those goals. But I also view that as something that the land bank can do within its existing mandate, and is, I think is a way that land bank can support its goals of preserving agriculture within San Juan County. So yeah, I guess it's a both end.
So I have a question. It was answered on the in the questionnaire, but it goes back to Kathy's point of differing of opinions. So one of the important questions, and I forget which commissioner asked it, was, can this farm, can Caulfield Farm run successfully as a farm for community benefit without financial inputs from the land bank. I'm not suggesting that the land bank doesn't need to or shouldn't provide financial. We're trying to get a sense of what's realistic to expect moving forward. We're still trying to get an idea of what does it and will it cost us to get the farm up to snuff with the soils and everything, and also moving forward on an annual basis. And there was some differing of opinions as to whether we need to look at this as a continued line item for the land bank. So just curious if any of you wanted to expound on that. There was.
That's why we suggested a reserve study be done on each building, so that upgrades and a list of upgrades in order to make them compliant, like, because it is county land, to be upgraded. And also, I mean, one of the things that stands out for me, just having a friend in a wheelchair, is ADA accessibility. I mean, that is, you know, could somebody with a handicap live on that farm? Can it be public? Can it be accessible? Because it is a pretty flat farm and it wouldn't take much, but is that something that needs to be addressed?
So I think we are.
The reserve study would give an idea, an overall scope of like, what is the lease amount? Because you can make a lease amount that covers those costs into the future, so that you can make a reserve account for those things with that money. It's not just money coming in each month, money going out each month. It's like, okay, a certain portion has to be set aside. So, you know, I mean, I deal with a lot of rentals, and I know that the margins are very, very small depending on the condition of each building. Because a roof, it will set you back $20,000, you know, new wiring and all those things. But if you did a reserve study up front, then you would have a really concrete picture of the farm and upgrades.
I think that is in our scheme. We're going to be talking about that next in our proposed timeline. Rob, Roy, just put your hand up, but Doug, you had your hand up first. So go ahead, Doug. I think you have your hand up.
Really, as a follow-up to your question, Sandy, at page 20 of the report, there's a statement to the effect that new capital improvements beyond repair and maintenance are required for the success of farming operations. And there was a long list of capital improvements, including housing and other things. What I kind of would like to get a better sense from the folks at CART is, you know, what were you thinking about in terms of capital improvements that are necessary, and are those capital improvements such that it really does change the nature of the operation of the farm? Because when Kaufholz operated the farm, it was a livestock-based operation. And it seems to me that if we're doing capital improvements, we may be going beyond that, significantly. And I kind of would like to get the input from people at CART on that.
I can try and take a go at those two questions, and then other folks can jump in. I think just kind of back to the original question about sort of financial sustainability. I think, yeah, looking at that balance, as Kathy mentioned, of, you know, what's the long-term maintenance cost, and then also looking at the fact that, you know, that there is potential for lease to help support some of those costs. I think historically there was no lease revenue. So it was kind of a one-way street. Whereas looking forward, I think what we've tried to advocate for is figuring out those kind of structures and agreements in a lease, so that there's clarity about who's responsible for what and how it gets paid for and costs. So that's just so critical that that's articulated. And exactly how that is worked out is it depends on the particular arrangement, but just keeping a focus on working that out into the future. And I think that goes a little bit to your question, Doug, of what capital improvements are needed. And I think, at least from my view, I would imagine that again would be a conversation with the future lessee or manager of the property, that if you had somebody who put together a proposal, just for example, this, we wanted to create a research education farm, and in order to create that vision, we would need a classroom space with a commercial kitchen. Just making stuff up here. That would be a conversation around who's going to pay for that infrastructure, and is that something the land bank is willing to invest in, recognizing that it owns this property, into forever, and will serve the community in that way, versus saying, well, we think that's something, so we're going to build a commercial kitchen with a classroom and then put it out for release. I guess that's how I see kind of those, potential capital improvement needs.
Brooke, I thought my focus really, in some ways, and I appreciate that, was that there is a sense in that statement that some new capital improvements are required for the success of anybody that's farming that. And I kind of, obviously there must have been some discussion within CARD as to what those are. And I was just trying to get a little better feel as to what those might be. Because the suggestion is, if we leave it as it is, it won't be a success for a farmer.
Even if we maintain the existing infrastructure, you're saying new investments that we don't know of would be required.
I think
That's
that
right.
goes to Doug's point of which model are we going to talk about? And so in looking at those models and thinking about the sentence about, that public benefit accrues back to the community in the form of food, education, and opportunities, how you value all those things. So that was part of the financial assessment of it. When you're talking about public entities, what are those factors that go into making a decision? Like, for example, why was the farm purchased in the first place? What were the goals? And then what's your goals with any kind of property that is purchased, or anything that the county does, in terms of, the county is acting in the public's best interest. Just the nature of government.
Right. Jim?
I have a couple of comments, sort of broad overview, in kind of how I'm feeling about this is that, first of all, if we're spending all this time discussing the difference between community benefit and public benefit, I just think that's bordering on absurd. I think there's so much talk and there's so much reporting and there's so many studies and stuff that it all seems to be just getting in the way of farming. I mean, how much does all this reporting and studies and all those things, how much does that cost before you actually really even do anything? I mean, it just seems to me that we spend so much time talking about Kaufeld that it seems uneven to me. We have, how many preserves do we have? How many farming properties do we have? And we spend so much time.
This is the one that has all the infrastructure and potentially a private farmer that may be perceived to have a great advantage over other farmers. That's just a few things that come to mind that I think we're looking to make. We didn't have a solid plan in the beginning. We maybe should or shouldn't even have bought the farm. That's a whole different question, but we own the farm and now we want to try to get it right after a very rocky decade. And we are trying here to make the right decision, I think, moving forward for the next 10 plus in perpetuity. But that's just me. Lincoln, you go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, how much time we spend on something, we believe me, we can get bogged down in almost anything. So that's just the way it goes. With regard to Kaufelt Farm, I think the reality is, you know, this is a critical project for us in so many different ways, especially as it pertains to Orcas in general. And it's worth taking the time. It's hard if you're not, if you are not living on Orcas, it's really hard to figure out the meaning of Kaufelt Farm or you know, how people are thinking about it who do live on Orcas. So it's one of these projects which it's not easy, but you know, we have to take the time to really make it work.
If we're moving on to the more like general discussions outside of cart questions or no?
Miles,
Yeah.
I want to try to go in order of who has their hand
Oh, sorry. I'll
up.
throw my
I'm
hand up there.
trying to watch that. Peter, you had maybe a response to Jim's comment, or you're muted.
Sorry, thanks. I was just going to go back to Doug Strandberg's question about the projects. I really, you know, a thing that comes to my mind, a tangible thing, is probably a water system that provides for, you know, long-term reliable supply. Not even expanding for irrigation or anything like that. Just, you know, just a core water system that we can rely on long-term. And I think that's an example of a capital improvement project that, you know, might need to happen at some point. I'll just leave it at that.
Got it. So Miles, you have your hand up, and I just wanted to point out that we have to shift over to some of the, you had mentioned, are we talking about general things? We're seeming like we're moving into specifics on our agenda here about timeline and lease extension. So did you have something you wanted to just briefly talk about in general before we move on to that, or?
No, it's related to the it's not a farming question. It's about the logistics of it and the lease. It's thoughts about that. So I was just waiting till we moved on to the next section before I brought it up. Okay. Sound good?
All
right.
It sounds good. And I just very briefly wanted to mention back to Jim's question is, I personally think I'm thinking in terms of renewal. To me, that's the most important thing for anyone who cares about conservation, is getting the land bank renewed. And I think that Kaufelt Farm is a polarizing subject on Orcas. And so it's important to approach it, to take the time, as Lincoln said. I think what we're looking for is to find out what is achievable and what will provide the most benefit and public support so that we can gain land bank support in the next renewal. That's where my mind goes. So that's why I think it's worth spending time on it. Krista.
Actually, it was Brian was ahead of me.
Oh, there's the big hand. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to Jim's question too, and I agree with what you said, Sandy, about perception and renewal and the expectations of the land bank's role in this. But Jim, you've kind of called the question, and I think it's the essential question of what is the Land Bank Commission's commitment to Kaufeld Farm? And so far, the commission has asked for an informed decision, more information on this. That's why we commissioned CART in the first place. That's why we're now looking and have asked for a reserve study. So, and I think that we ought to go ahead with those things. But Jim, you're calling the question, so I'll toss it back to you. What should the commission do with regard to moving forward with Kaufeld Farm? And I think we all need to answer that. And at some point, put our cards on the table and state what our commitment is.
All right. I'm unsure what my level of commitment is to Kaufeld Farm. Having been on the commission for over a decade, I've seen Kaufeld Farm be a challenge in many ways. Many times, some years worse than others, some years better than others. And so I'm sort of on the fence.
What would take you off
I
the fence?
describe my position.
Good question, Brian.
What would take you off the fence, Jim? What do you need to know to make a commitment or not?
Well, I'd like to see one thing or the other. One is we step away, and the other is we get a real solid long-term lessee and hammer out some things. But we don't seem to get there yet. We're not there yet.
Right. So that is the question we all need to answer, and that's what we're trying to do in this process.
Okay, but my concerns are that we're doing all that. We're splitting hairs with terms. We're spending an incredible amount of time on analyzing and what I think is overthinking. And and I think we need to make a decision one way or the other and jump into that decision, feet first. But
I agree.
I don't think we're there yet. And I haven't been convinced yet.
Okay.
Okay, David, you were next.
Yeah, I want the reserve study because what I want is to know something like the 10-year or 20-year cost of ownership. And I couldn't make any decision without that kind of information. I looked at the last budget we got, and it looks like we spend about $1.3 million a year on stewardship. I have no idea what percentage of that is spent at Kaufeld. I don't know what's being done or what's being neglected there. And I need to know that stuff if I'm going to have any opinion at all. I think it's clearly the most complicated project we have in a lot of ways. I think it's a really great project, but the information is not in front of me.
Okay, so reserve study is the next. Miles?
Yeah, I don't think we need more data about the farming practice and what is good for Kaufeld. I agree with David, and he brought this up at the last meeting, and I'm not sure why we aren't focusing on that, which is what are the numbers, what is the budget, which I think is perfectly reasonable place for us to move on to. CART did a great job of saying, here's what you can do with this place. Our job, I think, is to say, if we want to do that, here's how much it's going to cost. Do we want to spend that much money on it? Is that realistic for us? And the thing that I think is really important is that it's not about the land bank, it's about the farm. Like, I'm not focusing on the land bank and our image. I'm thinking about, how's that farm going to work? What's the best for the farm? If we can't do that, if we can't meet that because it's not within our budget, just the way that we might not be able to buy a wonderful property on Wantmau because it's not within our budget, that land is not going to disappear. You know, Kaufelt Farm is Kaufelt Farm. What's best for Kaufelt Farm should be separated from the land bank, I think. If we can't meet the standards that CART is setting, or whatever we think of as a group is what needs to be done for that farm to make it as best as possible, then we should step out and let someone else do that instead of trying to do it in a way that we can't. And the only thing I think that we're missing, I don't think I need more information about the farming. I think we need information about the budget, which I totally agree with David, that is really only the missing piece from my perspective. And again, it's not about land bank, it's about the farm. So.
Peter, you were next. You had something to.
I would just take a second to talk about the scope for the reserve study, but if you want to push that off later, we can do that.
Let's hold and see what Brian has to add.
Yeah, I would just add one caveat, I guess, to Miles' comment, and that's that, as I understand it, in terms of future costs, some of those costs are going to be discretionary. And I'm thinking particularly of soil amendments. And that's one reason I asked so many questions about soil amendments, how much and where. And the other big one is water. And those questions both kind of beg the question of, what is the land bank's commitment to stewardship in the sense of ecosystem services and also agricultural services? That is not just preserving the land, but improving it and in this case, working it. So those are things that the commission is going to have to decide what our commitment is to those things. And I think it's really a matter of our choice, our discretion. So something to consider.
Yes, Krista.
Doug has a question, and then I have a question.
Okay, I'm watching us approach our time, and we have a few other things that we need to get to. So just try to keep that in mind. Go ahead, Doug.
Yes. Following up, Sandy, you said that the farm is a polarizing project on Orcas. How do you and Brian feel about even our considering selling Kaufelt Farm as opposed to a long-term lease or any of the other models that were presented by CART?
So I would not consider selling to a private entity. My only consideration, my only thing would be, if my dream would be to have an entity, making this up, conservation district, a coalition. I still want it to be a community farm. Maybe we're not the best suited to be the whole owner of it and responsible for it. Maybe we can still be a contributor. But if we were to look at transferring ownership, I still think it should stay a community resource. I wouldn't want to see it go into just a private hands, and it produces food for the community, and that's the only box that it checks off. I think it has the possibility to be so much more. And when I say polarizing, it brings up strong emotions, and And there's probably more positives to that than negatives. So I think it has the ability to go even farther. So people care a lot about the farm here on Orcas. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah. Well, first of all, and I meant to say this in my last comment, I don't really agree that Caulfield Farm is a polarizing element in the Orcas community. The farm itself is not.
Correct. You're right.
Yeah. What the farm becomes, what we do with it could be very polarizing. And in that sense, you're right. It's very important to us in terms of public opinion and land bank renewal. To your question, Doug, as far as selling the farm, I'm personally open to that if that's the commission's consensus. I don't agree with it personally, but I think that if we're not willing as the land bank to make the commitment to the farm and do what it takes as the owner of the property and of also the steward and manager of a public property to make it successful, then we should consider other forms of ownership. But having said that, I would ask, is anybody else going to do what we could do for the farm and for the public?
David?
I wanted to ask you to clarify what you mean by polarizing. Like, what are the issues that are associated with the farm on Orcas?
I see it as boiling down to there's a group of people. I don't know what the group is, but I hear different comments. Peter's heard comments. And it's about investing the perception of investing public funds in supporting a private farming entity. I think that's one, and investing in infrastructure as opposed to land. And I know it all, when it comes to agriculture, it's all intertwined, but it's not about the farm itself. It's like Brian had pointed out, it's about where to apply public funds. That's really, some people say the land bank has no business owning that. The land bank shouldn't be putting money into that. The land bank should be this. So it's more about, goes back to the land bank. It's not about the farm. People love the farm, I think.
And I think that's a serious concern. I mean, I just think it's valid that people are thinking that, however small of a group that is.
Okay, I have a question or a comment, if I may.
We'll go to Krista. David, we can come back to you. Go ahead.
So just to give my 2 cents, first of all, I would like to make an observation that I appreciate the constraints of the agenda, and I have mentioned this in the past, and I think this topic warrants a special meeting for the commission so that we can set aside whether it's an hour or 3 hours. But putting it into this agenda to me is frustrating because we never get into the meat of any discussion and we don't move forward. So I'm going to ask that again, that either we just need to set aside some time. And if we don't fill the 3 hours, we don't fill it. But I'm just getting increasingly frustrated with having these hot topics mentioned. And then when Brian asks a question, calling the question, there's no question to call yet. And I think that's a bad way to characterize that, because I think we've proven our commitment, because we're still here talking about Caulfield Farm. If we weren't committed in some fashion to this project, we would not be putting all this time into it. So in terms of what we're going to do, that's the question, but the commitment, I think to question our commitment at this point was just not a nice thing to do, because I think we're quite committed to Caulfield Farm. and I would address Jim in terms of just taking and jumping into it. I think we jumped into it 10 years ago when we bought the property, and I'm not willing to jump again. I'll walk in, but I'm not going to jump in. So I think all of this time has been useful, and I agree with Miles. I don't need necessarily more information from the CART report. I agree with Miles and David about financial. To me, really, that is the meat of it now, finding out what different things, what would be the cost of different things. And I think where our discussion is going to have to lie at some point on page 38, there was a question, if the goal is to provide a broad spectrum of public opportunity, and my question on that was, is that our goal? So I think once we have the information on costs of basic infrastructure, we have the information on potential models on what could happen. And then I think when Brian's question is more to the point, is what is our degree of commitment or our ability to commit financially, programmatically within our mandate? But we haven't been there because we haven't had all the information. And the last remaining piece now, I think, is the financial information to see what it's going to cost in terms of basic infrastructure. That list of infrastructure items on page 20, the first part to me is kind of falls within our scope. That second, those 5 bullets to me feel somewhat out of our scope. A third entity could possibly provide those, but that's all kind of part of the modeling discussion that we get to once we know what it could cost just to maintain the farm. And I don't necessarily agree with Brian that soil amendments is kind of discretionary. I think if I've learned anything through this process, I think maintaining and protecting and enriching the soil is part of our obligation to owning that farm. Whether or not we build an education center may not be within that, whatever. So those are my comments, but I would really like to see this topic come back standalone. Let's have a discussion.
I agree, Krista, just for the record. I agree with everything you said. Although I didn't mean that soil amendments were discretionary entirely. I just meant that I understood, and I hadn't understood before, but I understood from CART's comments that sort of the degree or the order and timing of soil amendments was more discretionary than I had understood before.
Thank you. So I see there's 2 more hands up, Jim and David, and I do want to get to you. I want to make sure what I'm hearing here, and I agree as well, is that more data is needed about costs before we can really get into the meat of a discussion. And that's one thing. We have already secured, or what are we doing with getting the reserve study? So that's underway. I would suggest, Krista, that we hold off having our bigger discussion until we have the more data. Let's get more data, and then let's reconvene to meet about and talk about all the different directions this can go. And then with that said, my thought is that perhaps developing a proposed timeline for the request for proposals, maybe that's still putting the cart before the horse, from what I'm hearing. And really what we need to do is buy us more time by doing the lease extension. So that's my little part. And let me hear from Jim and David, and then we'll move on to those.
David was first.
David first.
Okay, so following up on what you said, that there's perception that we're putting money in support of a private entity. The way to answer that is to have long-term ownership cost information, and then to demonstrate that the lease that we're making with somebody to use the property covers that reasonably. And I don't think we're going to be expected to cover 100% of it, because I think we put ongoing money into every project. But I think we have to have those 2 numbers. If it costs $100,000 to own the place in the next 10 years? Are we getting $100,000 in lease fees, or, what is the balance?
Yes.
If we can't come up with hard numbers like that, we're delinquent. We just simply have to do that. And we should do that soon. We've been talking about this quite a while. And Krista expressed frustration about that, and I feel it too.
Yeah.
And I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, I'm a building contractor and I deal with this kind of question every single day. Like, what does it take to keep a property up? What do we have to do this year? What do we have to do next year? Can we push this off? Can we not? And so this is like the language I speak all the time. And we're just not doing it here.
Yeah. Christy, your comments about commitment, we're committed because we own it. We bought the farm, literally. And it's our fiduciary responsibility. The question is that a place that we should be? And everything that goes along with that question, is that a place we should be? Is that a place we should be helping a farming operation with public money? Is that a place we should be in terms of our mandate? So I agree with David, cost of ownership, we should have that in front of us before we make any long-term decisions.
Okay, yes, another hand up, Brooke.
I just wanted to make one quick invitation on behalf of Faith Vanderput. She's the coordinator for the Agricultural Resource Committee, and on May 26th, the Agricultural Resource Committee is hosting an agricultural organization retreat, and she wanted to extend an invitation to land bank commissioners who might be interested in learning more about how different organizations are working on agricultural issues in the county. So just wanted to put that out there. It's from 9 to noon on the 26th. If you're interested, you can get in touch with me or get in touch directly with Faith, or like,
great.
Yeah, work with
Thank
LinkedIn
you.
or others on that. But she just wanted to make sure that message was out there to you.
Thank you. I would like to flip the order of the next two items, the proposed timeline, which is going to take a longer discussion, and discussion of a short-term lease extension, which I would hope would be a shorter discussion. Presently, and in fact, I don't need to lead the discussion. Lincoln and or Peter, do you want to bring anything forward, or Charlie, about to discuss the short-term lease extension? So we can.
Well, I'll start. Yeah, I think that obviously we've extended the lease beyond the original 1 year, and now the question is really whether we need to do that again, because the timeline is stretching out, and we don't want to leave the Lums in an awkward, or not awkward, in a bad situation by having timing that really conflicts with their agricultural operations. And similarly, we want to, if we start a new lease with someone else, we want them to be in a good position to go forward in that year and actually utilize the property. So I think the question is whether we should extend it another year, and going along with that is the question of the lease rate, which we haven't made any decisions about. What we came up with was for short term, and I think it made as much sense as anything else, but it did not account for other parts of the farm that go along with the lease, other than housing. And so I think that's a question that we need to answer.
Okay, so Peter, did you want to add that that part of your proposal is for a lease rate. And then you want to explain how that would work, and then we could take that information and extrapolate it down to a short term and see what it meant for us.
Sure. I mean, very briefly, I was just wanting to let folks know that I reached out to agricultural appraisers a few weeks ago and then drafted a quote request for a study that, you know, would seek to evaluate the buildings and the other infrastructure and determine an appropriate base lease rate based on a combination of comparable ag leases in the county and other nearby counties. I mean, I know that'll be a very imperfect thing, but plus, you know, the anticipated maintenance costs over 10 or 20 years. And so you know, we've got, I think, an appropriate consultant potentially lined up who works with a building contractor, and hopefully we could get something like that completed in the next couple of months if we have a green light to go on it.
Oh, Peter, you know, you're talking about like what is the market value for a lease? The other way that David was talking about was like what is our cost that we can recover? Do you have any idea about that?
Well, that would be, you know, so ultimately some sort of base lease rate would be, we'd come up with that based on a combination of what our liabilities are, capital improvements and just general maintenance, and you know what's the range of lease rates regionally. I know this is a unique situation, but you know through those two items, we'd hopefully come to a base lease rate that would make sense, and certainly at least would be justifiable by having done some research.
Mm-hmm. So within the next 2 months, we should be able to have a reserve study to know about maintenance and also a range of a potentially appropriate lease rates.
That would be the goal.
Okay.
And we're talking long-term rates, not your initial question was about extending this lease for another year and potentially looking at the short-term lease rate. Is that right? Wasn't that the question?
That's right. I think as Peter had pointed out before, that even though the long-term lease rate will be have different factors from a short-term lease rate, that he felt it was important that we, before extending again, that we have some basis for determining that lease rate, the short-term lease rate. It would all be refactored into the fact that it's a short-term lease, not a long-term lease.
Okay.
But looking for some data as opposed to extending it at the current rate without further investigation. Am I saying that right, Peter? We recognize that we'd like to have a extension because we don't have this wrapped up yet.
Yeah, I mean, my primary focus was a long-term lease rate that was, based on best available data, and to the extent that we need to consider that in the short-term one, that's up to the commission. But
yeah, so I hear two things we're proposing. Sorry, Doug.
Doug, go ahead.
Peter, we've got invested about 1.8 million into Kaufelt Farm as of this date. Is that taken into consideration when you're dealing with the lease rate? And if it is, it seems like it's going to kind of put it way out there.
I think that right now we have a draft quote request, which would be translated into a scope of work. I think that input on that will be helpful, and it's maybe I'll follow up with you on that specifically. I mean, there's in some ways there's probably no way to capture all the costs of Kaufelt Farm, but if we can know what it's going to cost us from year to year over the next decade or two, I think that would go a long way towards helping us plan and lease it at an appropriate rate, like David was saying earlier.
Aaron has a spreadsheet that provides all the costs for Caulfield Farms to date.
Thank you, Doug.
Yes,
Brian,
I
I
do.
see you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Sandy. I do have that in discussion with Lincoln and Peter. I do have some baseline numbers assembled from the acquisition of the first conservation easement in 95 and then the purchase in 08 and the current lease amount and expenditures. So there are some baseline numbers that we will have available when constructing the lease prices.
Brian, I see you, but Krista, you wanted to say something before. And first, I apologize. I can't keep this on track for once we get on to Caulfield.
You're doing a great job.
Too many
yes, you
comments or
are.
else we're just going to cut people off.
I know.
So go ahead, Krista.
Well, I think the question I'm hearing, number one, are we in agreement or is there a consensus to extend the lease for another year? I don't know if we did come to agreement on that. I'm in agreement to do it, but I just thought that was one of the items we needed to address. And then if there's a discussion or desire to potentially modify the lease, the short-term lease rate, I say the reserve study and the rental market rental information might be helpful, but I don't know if we want to wait for that to secure the short-term lease and put the LUMs in a position to where they know they're in for another year, and with some idea of if we're going to modify the short-term lease, I guess I'm saying let's identify what are key things that might be done there without making everybody wait until this other report is in. I see I want the report and I appreciate the report, but I think I'd like to see the LUMs continue operating with a sense of security for a year. And if there's minor modifications to the lease agreement, great. But if it's going to be big, they should know that ahead of time so they can say, yeah, thanks, but we can't do that or whatever. So I'm not kind of interested in playing around with that short-term lease too much. I don't think that's fair.
Got it. Okay, Brian.
Yeah, I basically have the same question as Krista, and I agree with what she just said. And my question to you, Sandy, and I guess to staff too, is what are you looking for? What are we looking for today? Are you looking for an approval of the lease extension? And when are you looking for a determination on the short-term lease rate? I personally didn't think that was very connected to the market study or the negotiation for a long-term lease. I think it's kind of independent, and we might want to consider modifying the current lease rate, current short-term lease rate somewhat. But to me, it's really a simpler and a different question than determining a long-term lease rate. So I agree with Krista.
Agree, Jim, and then we'll get to a consensus. Go ahead, Jim. Oops, you're muted.
Would it be appropriate to maybe ask Amy Lum, who is on this call, to comment on how she feels about all this and how she and Eric feel about all this? I just think that it's got to make them uncomfortable. I think it would be good to hear from them about these two questions, the proposed timeline to develop an RFP and the short-term lease extension.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for asking.
Let me put one more thing on the table, and that is that by all accounts, any Orcasians that I know are saying, that you guys are doing a fantastic job. So, that's
we love it, but yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, we're trying really hard. We're working really hard. It would be nice to have some known stability. We're kind of going along as if we're going to be here, because if we just assume we're going to be done at the end of the year, we got to start packing up now. And I mean, it's a big operation, and I encourage you all to come over and stop by and see what we're doing, if you haven't already. And the lease amount, if it goes up to, farming is really hard work, and we're not making any significant money at it. We are doing a lot for the land. We're doing a lot for the public perception of the land.
And a lot of volunteer educational
Right.
programs.
There's a lot of volunteer educational programs. There's a whole lot of things that don't have dollar amounts attached to them that you guys are benefiting from us being here. And so, that's a whole discussion we can have if you raise the lease amount, and then, we can start accounting for some of the infrastructure improvements that we're doing on our own, just because we want the place to be better, and take care of things. So yeah, before you include us in the discussion is basically what it comes down to.
Thank you. So
Thank you.
I would like to propose that we, that the commission agreed to the lease extension. Let me know if raise your hand if you have any opposition, and then let the details of that extension be worked out between Charlie, Peter, and Lincoln. I don't think that the whole commission needs to be in discussion about lease rates or tweaking little parts of the lease, but we can give our yay or nay, like, yes, let's move forward and get this done so we've got more time. So is all in favor of all right, thumbs up. All right, Jim, thumbs up.
All in favor of the lease extension? Is that what we're?
Yeah,
voting on?
all in favor of the lease extension. Let the people involved in the lease work out details of the lease extension, but let's get it extended so something actually got done off our list. Okay, good, that's done. Do folks have ability? Let's see, we have another meeting scheduled, am I right, Lincoln? So we really can't extend this longer. So what we didn't get to was the proposed timeline to develop a request for proposals. And it's a pretty in-depth timeline. It marches forward saying that once we have reserve studies and the other pieces of information, that by September or so, we will be able to talk about putting together an RFP. And if at that point we talk about, well, we're not doing an RFP, then that changes. So I think that in my mind, the proposed timeline is looking okay and allows us for flexibility moving forward, but importantly, it gets the process started with the, so anyone have anything to add there, or questions or comments about the timeline? We have to wrap up here in a few moments. Anyone have issues with the timeline put forward to get things underway? It can be tweaked along the way, but can we?
I like it. I support it.
Okay, we can work with what we have on paper. Okay. All right. I'm gonna skip over future agenda items because we have a backlog of future agenda items, if that's okay, in interest of time, and go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Sandy?
Yes.
So following up on Krista's earlier comment and request, are we going to schedule a special meeting to
I
continue
think
this discussion?
I agree that we should, but we should have the data. We should have the reserve study. We should have more information so we can get into the meat of it. So that would be at the end of the summer. We'll
Yeah.
that would be my thought.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. Thank you everyone for hanging in there, and we'll see you next time.
Good job, Sandy.
All righty. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.